As I mentioned in my previous video covering the Dragapult EX League Battle Deck, the value you get for $30 US is insane. Releasing on April 25th, you get a full 60-card deck featuring 4 Dragapult EX, 1 Fezandipiti EX, and 1 Unfair Stamp, plus a ton of staple trainer cards. Obviously, prices for singles are always fluctuating, and they'll likely go down once the League Battle Deck is out, but right now it's around $55 to get everything on its own. And whereas past League Battle Decks almost required you to buy 2 copies, you just need 1 here. Honestly, while the list isn't perfect, you could easily take this to your local game store and beat off some strangers without thinking too much. Of course, some upgrades are necessary to consistently take wins. For the first mini upgrade, you want to remove 1 Dragapult EX plus 1 each of Natu and Xatu. Dragapult only needs a Psychic and a Fire Energy to attack, making a 3/3 line of Xatu unnecessary. In fact, Xatu is almost entirely unnecessary due to that low attack cost, but for this upgrade I'll keep it cheap and quick. You still have a 2/2 Xatu line in the deck, meaning attacking with Phantom Dive should be fairly easy. Just make sure you have a Psychic Energy in hand, then use Xatu's ability to accelerate it to your bench Dreepy, Drakloak, or Dragapult. Card draw definitely won't be an issue here. Drakloak allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck each turn and grab one of them. Xatu draws you 2 cards whenever its ability is used. And Fezandipiti draws you 3 cards if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Going even further, the deck also runs Tatsugiri, which can act as a Pokegear, potentially getting you a supporter with its ability. In addition to Arven, which is a great setup supporter, and Iono, which draws you cards, the list also includes Professor Turo and Mela. Turo is great at bringing up a damaged Pokemon, potentially denying a prize card or 2. Mela, meanwhile, is good, accelerating a Fire Energy from the discard pile if one of your Pokemon was just knocked out. Yes, it's more energy acceleration in a deck that doesn't really need it. Still, we'll keep it in the cheap upgrade while you learn the list. Okay, with 1 Dragapult, 1 Natu, 1 Xatu, and 1 Tatsugiri removed, that gives us 4 cards to add. The first one is Budew, arguably the most hated card in Standard. A 30 hit point baby with a 0 retreat cost and a 0 attack cost, the whole point of Budew is to annoy the crap out of your opponent. Dealing just 10 damage, Itchy Pollen prevents your opponent from playing items the following turn. That means no Buddy-Buddy Poffin, no Earthen Vessel, and no playing with your balls. This card is solely responsible for games taking several more turns than they should, as it can completely screw you over. To that end, at least 1 copy of either Jacques or Brock Scouting is a great idea. While Dragapult isn't as screwed over as other decks when it comes to item lock thanks to Drakloak, supporter-based Pokemon search is still a good idea. Jacques is locked to 2 evolutions, while Brock can either get you 2 basics or 1 evolution. Neither are perfect, but Budew practically forces you to play one of them. And finally, Hawlucha. Because of Dragapult, decks with low HP basics are playing the 70 hit point versions rather than the 60 hit point ones. Well, Hawlucha allows you to overcome that obstacle, paying 1 damage counter to 2 of their bench Pokemon when it's played from hand. So long as you don't start Hawlucha, it can make the mirror matchup better or to help slow down someone like Charizard or Goldengo. Between these 4 cards, it should cost you around $4. The reason for the high price is that Budew is upwards of $2 each. Yeah, that's how good this thing is. A freaking common is $2. You also shouldn't be afraid to remove a Fire Energy for 1 extra Iono, as the Earthen Vessel can always get you the energy you seek. Now, if you want to turn your Dragapult EX League Battle Deck into a top-tier Dragapult deck, you're going to have to whip it out. Based on the top 8 list from Atlanta earlier this month, this is what an upgraded Dragapult deck should look like. I made a few modifications like using 3 Dragapult instead of 2 because getting screwed over by prizes is never fun. I also held off on some of the bells and whistles like Bravery Charm and Defiance Band, but for the most part, you could take this to a regional and see some success. In total, using prices before the League Battle Deck is out, it'll cost just under $20 to make all the necessary upgrades. And believe it or not, the 1 copy of Arven and 2 Night Stretcher account for almost half of that. For starters, Xatu is gone completely. Same with Mela. Between Crispin and Experience Share, getting energy on your Dragapult shouldn't be difficult. Plus, Budew's whole purpose in life is to buy you time that you can use to manually attach energy to your dragons. And worst case scenario, Dragapult does 70 damage for a single energy, which can take KOs or soften up big targets. Crispin's a strong card in Dragapult because it also opens up the possibility for Monkey Dory. Attach a Darkness energy to the Monkey Dory and it can take up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon and send it to an opponent's Pokemon. This is perfect for screwing over someone who Budews you. Elsewhere, add 1 copy of Blood Moon Ursa Luna EX. Looping Dragapult isn't always the easiest thing in the world. Chuck in the bear, now you have an amazing late game attacking basic who can deal 240 damage for as little as 0 energy so long as they've taken 5 prizes. On the trainer side, it's just about filling your holes. Artisan helps get basics, a full 4 Iono and 4 Arven increases consistency. The extra countercatcher and boss's orders let you pick your targets, and Night Stretcher allows you to get a Pokemon or basic energy back from the discard pile. Otherwise, if you hate consistency but enjoy destroying people's souls, go with the second place Atlanta list that runs the Dust Noir line. This way, you can deal with someone who thinks they can be cheeky and run Rabsca to protect their bench. Or you can soften up a Charizard EX, activating Countercatcher in the process, then finish them off. While Dusclops and Dust Noir do give up a prize card when they knock themselves out, used properly, those 5 or 13 damage counters you put on one of their Pokemon can completely swing momentum in your favor. This list shares many similarities with the other one, except obviously you have to make room for Dust Noir. I personally played this version many times on TCG Live and had horrible luck, so I made a few changes to help with consistency. All in all, it's about $15 to make the necessary upgrades. Best part is, if you decide to build either version of Dragapult, you have almost everything you need to build the other version of Dragapult. So for about $50 to $60 total, you can have 2 different Dragapult lists that both finish top 8 at the first major post-rotation tournament. If you're wondering about the lack of technical machine evolution in Dragapult decks, it's because you're supposed to be using Budew every turn. Taking a turn off to evolve is seen as worse than item locking them. Still, because you already play Arven, don't be afraid to experiment and add in a copy of TM Evolution. One other possible change is buying a copy of Sparkling Crystal for a couple of dollars and making that your ace spec instead of Unfair Stamp. Sparkling Crystal is Arven searchable and allows your Dragapult to attack for a single energy. It just makes your life smoother than my feet. But Unfair Stamp can literally win you games by giving your opponent a 2-card hand after something like Budew is knocked out. Whatever you decide to Budew, you'll find lists for the various Dragapult decks in the description, which you can copy and paste into Limitless or TCG Live. The next major milestone for your Dragapult EX deck is May 30th with the release of Destined Rivals. There's a few cards you need to be aware of that will make Dragapult stronger, and one that might make it weaker. First up, you'll want a single copy of Shaman. Facing decks like Gardevoir and Terrabox means your Drakloak are ripe for the pickings, as you have no way of protecting them from Streamtail or Wellspring Masked Ogerpon. With Shaman, it protects all of your single prize Pokemon on the bench from damage. For the new players out there, Shaman only blocks damage, not damage counters, so a Dragapult will still be able to ping your bench with Shaman in play. The other downside to Shaman is that it has 80 hit points, so you can't find it with Buddy-Buddy Poffin, meaning Artisan, Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, and Brock Scouting become more important. On the offensive side, we have Team Rocket's Crobat EX. This is definitely a luxury and not a necessity, but it does make Dragapult more annoying. Another Stage 2 line, this one is all about spreading damage counters like their cheeks. When you evolve into Golbat from hand, it puts 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Then when you evolve into Crobat EX from hand, it puts 2 damage counters on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Not game-breaking by any means, unless it, doesn't work properly on PTC GL, but Crobat simply offers up more ways to spread counters and take knockouts. The added bonus of Crobat is that it can be reused. One of the problems right now for Dragapult in Standard is Lily's Clefairy EX giving it a weakness. While Clefairy itself isn't weak to Dark, Mew EX and several other psychic attackers are. So you can attach a Team Rocket's energy to Crobat, hit them for 240 damage through weakness, and send it back into your hand. You do lose the attached energy in the process, but it's still a fun way to cheese some knockouts. Now, you're probably wondering why Copperaja EX's ability is called Bronze Body and not Copper Body. Also, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about Crobat EX when Dust Noir exists. Well, here's where an interesting wrinkle appears. There's a little card in Japan called Psyduck. Put it into play, now all of a sudden Pokemon with an ability that blow themselves up no longer have an ability. As you now know, Dusclops and Dust Noir both have an ability that blows themselves up. Obviously, when Psyduck comes out, this is going to be devastating for any decks running the Dust Noir line. The problem is, at least at the moment, we don't know when Psyduck's coming out. It could be with Destined Rivals on May 30th, or it could be in our September set. We just don't know right now. Regardless, once Psyduck is out in English, you may want to steer towards a Crobat build rather than a Dust Noir build. To quell any concerns you might have about wasting your money, Dragapult EX carries an H regulation mark in the bottom left. This means it will remain standard legal until March 2027. So if you do end up buying the lead battle deck, you'll be able to use all of the main cards of one of the strongest decks for nearly 2 years. Yeah, like I said, this is insane value. Now that I've covered all the boring IRL stuff that requires you to interact with humans, let's go where everyone's happy, Pokemon TCG Live. The best news about the Dragapult Lead Battle Deck on Live is that you don't need to buy it. Dragapult is one of the free decks given to all players in 2025 for simply booting up the game, so buying it in-game or purchasing a code to redeem it in-game isn't necessary. You will need to craft a few missing cards like 2 Drakloak and maybe Unfair Stamp, but for around 1,000 trade credits you can turn it into a competitive deck. Of course, this brings up the question of trade credit farming and whether Dragapult is a good option. Because the dev introduced shop limits late last year, the whole credit farming situation is out of whack. All the same, I decided to line everything up and do some math. While you've probably seen this image I created letting you know how many credits each lead battle deck offers when you own 4 copies of every card inside, it's imperfect. Instead, you now have to look at how many credits you get from buying the maximum 4 copies of the deck. Except I don't know what's in your collection, and the amount you earn will be different than the amount someone who hasn't subbed to me earns. So yeah, they took something that we spent years perfecting and tracking and screwed it up with one change. Anyways, if you were to buy 4 copies of the Dragapult EX Lead Battle Deck on TCG Live for 5,000 trainer points as a new player, you'd end up with 8,330 trade credits. Assuming I did all the math correctly, which is a big assumption, your first Lead Battle Deck will only award 1,500 credits, while the fourth will give you 2,500. To put this number in perspective, buying 4 copies of the Shadow Rider VMAX Lead Battle Deck from July 2022 gives you 11,500 trade credits, or an increase of more than 3,000. The upside with buying the Dragapult deck is that any excess cards are standard legal, whereas pretty much everything in the Shadow Rider deck is only playable in Expanded. Still, the whole strategy with TCG Live is to gain as many credits as possible to craft the cards you're missing, so no, Dragapult is not a great option for credit farming. To quickly sum up this video, the Dragapult EX Lead Battle Deck is insane value for $30. Doing all of the necessary upgrades to make it a Tier 1 tournament level deck costs maybe $20, though your play space will be filled with far too many dice from all the damage counters you'll be spreading. On TCG Live, do not buy the Lead Battle Deck. It's not the best option for credit farming, and you already get a Dragapult deck free for simply booting up the game before March 2026. If you have any questions about Dragapult or advice on how to play Dragapult optimally, use the comments below. YouTube did add a new feature where you can't comment unless you're subscribed, so make sure you do that first.